We are. Okay, well, good afternoon and good evening, everybody. Welcome to CCL's July 22nd, 2024 Electrification Action Team webinar. We are talking this evening about how to have climate conversations, especially in rural areas. And our guest presenter is Steffi Rausch. Steffi, wave hello. And we'll introduce her in great detail here in a minute. But I'm Pete Marsh. I'm one of the four co-leads of this action team, along with Steffi, with Mark Friedman, with Michael Metzner, Jay Bassett. And we have a co-leader emerita on the call. Julia Moravchik was with us for a while, and she's now focusing on Go Electric Colorado and another bunch of other initiatives in Colorado. But anyway, so that's a quick overview of tonight. Before we dive into tonight, I'm going to share my screen and just give a quick look ahead. And you should be seeing the CCL calendar for the Electrification Action Team. And I had it in August. Here we are in July on our third Monday webinar. And we've held two in the last 2 Mondays. Tonight we'll hold a third one, and next week we'll be talking about electrification fairs, electrification home tours, and induction meal parties. And then August is, I think, as everybody knows, is going to be Electrification Month. I've got a couple of pop-ups that I'm trying to get rid of. There they go. They faded away. So August 1st, Dana Nuccitelli, our research coordinator extraordinaire, is going to host one of his CCUs, Citizens Climate Universities, and his topic that night is going to be on the Inflation Reduction Act and electrification. A week later, Flannery Winchester in our marketing department is going to host an Ask Me Anything. And we've invited CCLers from around the country to share about their home electrification journeys. And that'll be an Ask Me Anything style. Then August 26th, we're going to have a guest speaker, Sean Armstrong from Redwood Energy, and he'll be talking about, this is probably going to be his 15th or 20th episode in a webinar series that he does, hosted sometimes by Climate Reality Project chapters, sometimes by Elders Climate Action. This will be the first one CCL has hosted, but Sean has a wealth of knowledge. He's a leading zero carbon designer of buildings, and he loves to do what's essentially an Ask Me Anything and have guests on presenting about their home electrification, and then they ask him questions on the spot. What should I do? It's almost a stump the chump style approach, but he's a wealth of knowledge and a very kind human being. So he gives great info in a wonderful way. So that's a preview of some things that are coming up. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We're up to 37 participants. Welcome, everybody. And for those who didn't hear, I suggested that anybody that likes can drop into the chat your preferred approach for how to start climate conversations, climate solutions conversations, when it's a challenging topic to talk about. But now for the star of our show tonight, we have Steffi Rausch, who is a group leader in Western North Carolina and one of the co-leads of our Electrification Action Team. And she exemplifies one of the things I love to say, which is, let's stop talking about it and get off the couch and go do it. And Steffi has come up with an approach to talking with elected officials or staffs in conservative rural towns, and talking about how an electrification plan, climate action plan can benefit them. So with that, Steffi, welcome. Thank you so much, and take it away.
All right. Oh, I lost the chat once I started sharing. So
I'll keep
let's,
an eye on it.
okay, actually, I wanted to give you guys this link. There we go. I found the chat again. So there is a link to these resources that I'm going to share with you today. And yeah, let me know if anything comes up in the chat. But first, I want to say thank you to Beth Carmichael for bringing this to bear to share with them what we do and then them inviting us to do this. This is wonderful to get this more out there. It's been pretty successful in North Carolina, and I am excited to share with you how we made it happen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. So there are 5 reasons why I believe this is a great initiative. First, it helps to get CCL volunteers involved in something meaningful and achievable. And I guess, a bit more local, but it definitely is the whole purpose of this local initiative is to basically show support to our conservative legislators. Okay. It encourages cities and counties to get on board with climate action because it makes economic sense to do so. So you're talking more about budget. It forms a good starting relationship from which to build upon and gain their trust. And in fact, I have known many of these conversations have lended themselves right into the talk of carbon pricing. So if they adopt a plan, they will realize that much more is needed to help them meet their goals. And that's that, or sometimes they'll ask a question like, well, when do you really think the energy companies are going to come on board? And that's when I say, not unless there's a price on carbon. So those are kind of how those conversations go. And then it sends a signal of support to our federal legislators, especially the conservative ones, that cities are saving money through the energy transition. We have our legislator is big on budgets. He was in the state and now in the federal government, and so we're hoping that this will speak to him. He likes to save money for sure. And then 5 steps on how. It's as simple as just finding one constituent or resident to request a meeting with their city official. In some cases, if we meet them at a tabling event and they ask to meet with us and we don't have a constituent yet, we do it too. So like we did that recently. But the second is to meet with that city official and ask that constituent or resident share a personal story or concern of their impacts in their town. And then ask the legislator what they're doing to address climate or to lower their energy costs, right? And a lot of times they want to share right up front. So it almost, in some cases, they're like, well, can I just first share what we're doing locally? And then they do. So it really is a great way to open up the conversation. And then we have prepared these handouts in those resources that the resource link that I gave you. There's 2 handouts. The first one is on action plan savings and funding, the why of doing it. And the second handout is the action plan purpose and process, the how. So I'll go over those a little bit, but having those in the meeting with you, which I make copies for everyone, it really does help open up the conversation. It's something that I've learned as to how sustainability or climate action plan has been created in my own town. So we recommend also some resources to them, some groups that they should join in order to get access to some tools or funding or grants. There's even a pro bono resource we'll recommend here. And then ask if they will adopt a plan or what are the next steps? Like, who should we talk to next if they are interested, and or if we like meeting with all of the city council people first before you go to talk at city council. Sometimes they'll let you give a presentation to city council. But we have found that honestly, adults making comments doesn't seem to do very well. And we've had, 10, 15 people make comments and they don't care. But somehow when the youth gets involved, they do. So if you do have to end up going to council, and we'll show you a little bit about that, where you have to drum up support from the community where you've met with them and they're not really fully on board, that's when I say get a youth group involved. And there's the Interact Club, which is part of Rotary. So in other words, there's a Rotarian that's maybe in the school system and started Interact Club. That's how we got ours done through there. We had, I don't know, it was like 60 students that showed up to a 6 a.m. morning meeting, and 5 of them wanted to go speak to council. But other than that, maybe find an environmental club, just try to do presentations to the schools, find a science teacher, I don't know, find a way in that door, for sure. Make comments at their public meetings and support at that point with the youth. And so there is an example of that later, but share your success at the end with federal legislators, like what are the energy savings that these towns are doing and why did they adopt a climate action plan? So this is the handout 1 that goes over on, they're two-sided, each one of these. So the first one, and I giving you access to this, it is in the form of a Google Drive document. So please just copy it and create your own for your town, for your local area, your state. I basically found out what cities in my state had had a climate action plan or sustainability action plan, whatever it is they want to call it, or resiliency plan, and found out what savings they had. And they were in the range of like $80,000 to $100,000 a year ongoing. And a lot of it was from LED lighting replacements or 3 town locations like a community center, an aquatic center, and a town hall. So that was pretty amazing. There's also a police department in Kentucky that saves $7,000 per year per vehicle on maintenance and gas costs. And then there's on the backside these funding resources that go through the various organizations that we recommend they join. The SSDN, the Southeast Sustainability Directors Network, of course, it's only for the Southeast, so I don't know if you have something like this in your area, but they're amazing. They have an annual conference where all the cities come together. They get to collaborate with each other. They have peer learning. Maybe someone could mute their line because they're coughing. Yeah, and then they deliver state-specific energy and sustainability updates. They let them know about funding. And then ICLEI is a national or international group, I believe. I don't know what it stands for. I never can remember that, but their membership is a little bit more. It's $1,200 per year as compared to the other was $345 per year. So usually they don't bulk at SSDN, but ICLEI they do. But the great benefit of that, of joining ICLEI, is that they give them a measurement tool. So, you have to measure your carbon footprint before and after in order to know if you're going to meet your goals in the climate action plan. So they get access to this tool that also gives them predictions. So if they do this, how much would it reduce their emissions by? So that is a really wonderful tool. Not all tools give you that option. Even there's an EPA measurement tool, but it doesn't give projections. So that is why we recommend that. And then there's the State Funding Readiness Project, which offers pro bono services to help jurisdictions such as states, U.S. territories, tribes, and local governments advance climate and equity goals. And so they help them find federal funding. And so for their region, so a lot of times what we found is like this one instance, one town nearby that created a volunteer board, and they had people on the board that knew how to write grants. So they decided to write some grants, and they got a really big time grant, but now they're having trouble getting other grants. And the thing is, they're trying to reinvent the wheel. They don't really know what's out there. There's so much available out there right now. This is kind of what the time to do it. But unless you have like a real resource that knows what grants are out there, like you're just wasting your time. I mean, why not use a pro bono resource, right? So that's what we're recommending to them. And then the handout 2 goes over the purpose, like what is the purpose of a sustainability action plan or climate action plan? And number one is reduce your carbon footprint. So meaning the municipal, the city or the county buildings and transportation fleets. So they're going to lead by example by reducing their carbon footprint and saving money by doing so. And then number two is to support, educate, and engage with the community, meaning supporting them to also make change, the residences and businesses. And in some cases, like in Asheville, they actually got grant money to replace oil and gas heaters with mini splits for low-income homes. So you can even go a step further and help subsidize the transition for your residents as well. And then the third part of any action plan is to address climate resilience, equity, and adaptation policies. So how to mitigate flooding and drought, fire, and, redo your infrastructure better, deal with climate refugees if you're a place where people are moving to. So, and then at the last part of this first side here, it talks about how the Inflation Reduction Act offers multiple renewable subsidies to help local governments transition. In fact, in some cases, local governments must have a climate action plan or a staff person in order to qualify for certain grants, like a formula and competitive grants. Now, not always, but in some cases. So funding is limited and it's time sensitive. The time is now. A lot of these grants have already gone by the wayside. So I don't know how many are available or left. There's you open up a whole door there. I would not recommend you get into helping them find grants. That is not your job. Your job here is to just try and get them on board with it and let them find that money. And then on the back side is the process. So there's basically 3 steps. Committing, number one, where they write a resolution or adopt a comprehensive plan policy to commit to reducing their carbon footprint by a certain time frame and by how much, right? And as we know, the time frame that is recommended is the 50% by 2030 and 100% by 2050 by the IPCC. A lot of them don't even know that timeline, so it's really good to share that and explain that if you do a resolution or a plan, that it should be measurable. It should be mentioned in there, the timeline and the amount of reduction that they plan to do. This step 2 is to develop the plan, and they can hire a consultant, a staff member, or utilize a new or existing board or a committee that can be volunteer and or staff. And a lot of times if they don't have money, utilizing a committee, a volunteer committee is the way to go. And then eventually, if they get enough grants, a lot of times the next step is hiring a full-time staff person. And then there's a link here to the zeroenergyproject.com, which I would like to show you that. I didn't bring it up, but I will now because it is a really good link to show them. So I bring my laptop in there with me, and this is where that committed, developing, and implementing those 3 steps that we're talking about right now are listed as the status for each of these locations. And as you can see on the right-hand side, if they have an action plan, like this one is an I, so that would be that are implementing it. So they probably do have one. This one's committed, so they might not have one yet. But it links you to hopefully the page that they have with these details. And so a lot of times what I do is they say, okay, well, we're only a very small town. We're only 7,000 people. I can't imagine there's any resources out there, any cities that have done this with that many people. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll type in my my state, and then we have 10 places, and we go through each one and we look at the population that's right here. And so you'll see that in some cases we have one in Hillsborough that's only 7,000. So that's a really, even one with 4,000 that's done a climate action plan. So this is a really good tool. So if they want to see actual climate action plans, this is where it's at. All right, so getting back to the slides. And then the last step, like I said, was the implement and promote. You can have your consultant or staff or committee, volunteer board, manage the implementation, but also to promote the efforts to the public so that they know what's happening. So yeah, again, this is that Southeast Sustainability Directors Network, the $345 per year for small towns. And it has over 100 members. I think in North Carolina there were like 30, so I was really surprised. It is truly really helpful. And like I said, this ClearPath tool is that measurement tool. Now, one town in particular only joins ClearPath every 3 years in order to use that measurement tool. So as a benchmark tool, right? So they don't join every year. That is something you could recommend, which then cuts the cost down to basically 400 a year, right? So similar to SSDN. And like I had shown you before, that website, there are 600 nationwide, and sometimes I share with them how many are in the state, and then our state also has a climate action plan, and they're always interested in knowing who. And then the time is now to stress urgency that we really cannot wait anymore, that if they want to get a piece of this pie and get some extra funding from grants, that they need to do it now. And the helpful argument there is that, a lot of them say they have limited budgets, they don't have enough staff and not have enough money. And I think what we say to that is, well, the thing is, if you do this, you will save money, and you can then utilize that money for whatever other initiatives that you have. And so I can't think of any other initiative that brings back money to a city that allows them to have a better, a better budget or revenue. So definitely try to get that in if you can. And in some cases, mentioning to them that the climate action plan or staff person does help them qualify for grants, especially these two formula and competitive grants. There is also in the resources this guide for local governments on climate action and the IRA. And it is a really good guide. It has, I'm trying to scroll down where you will see how the money flows through to government. So as you can see here, it shows how much is coming out and where it's going, whether it be housing or commercial buildings or resilience or cleaning vehicles. And in some cases, if you want to find those formula and competitive grants, I do a search and you'll find them listed here. It'll say right here, it says competitive grant. So you'll find them in there. The other grants, though, there's a third grant that goes to all cities regardless. Okay, then getting back. So yeah, the next step is, showing you this, which I already showed you. And then when you get enough cities or counties on board, promote and share with your federal legislators, like I said before, especially the savings. This is what got promoted for our work. We didn't actually have to do any promotion here. That was the newspaper picked it up, but this is the Interact School Club that I had approached, and we did get quoted in the article, so it was free promotion for sure, where these kids came to speak, 5 of them, and normally during comment period, councilmen do not respond to anyone speaking, making a comment. Usually, never, ever have I ever seen that happen. In this particular case, the mayor literally responded. And I think the newspaper picked up on that, how that was, they'd never seen that before. And we had met with every single city council member on that board in Hendersonville, and they all seemed on board except for the mayor. So it was very telling that we had also had tons of adults come and speak at city council. They never listened. We had meetings with all of them. We had people speak and they never listened until the youth came. I can't say that it's going to be as easy as that in your town, but after we saw that and how effective it was, we're starting to utilize that in other towns that we're approaching as well. And then in Waynesville, they decided, so they hired a sustainability staff person in Hendersonville after this, like shortly after, a month or two. And then in Waynesville, that was pretty easy. We had a CCLer that lived in Waynesville. We went and met with one city council member. He loved the idea and he pitched it and got it done. And that was that. It was easy as that. So that was a very lucky win for us. He actually asked the CCLer, Mary, to join the sustainability board that they created, and they are the ones that won that really big time grant. And they do a really good job in the article of talking about the savings over and over again. So I would recommend that they do that when they do get something done. So this is the last slide with that bit.ly link that I gave you in the chat. That gives you access to this folder. Let me get to it right here. And so we have like an SSDN membership overview flyer. We have something else from SSDN they wanted us to give out, but also there's an IRA handout. There's the ICLEI membership overview flyer. There's the handouts in the an editable version here or a PDF, but remember to copy the editable version to edit it for your own purposes. There's an email request for initial meeting with City Council that we just give an example of what a volunteer might send. We give it to them and let them change it how they want. And then this presentation I'm giving today is in there as well if you ever want to give this presentation elsewhere. This is the IRA guide we went over. And then this is a presentation that I gave to others to encourage them in that town to speak up on getting a cap done. So whether it be the students or others. And then there's a presentation description that I created for that presentation. And then there's this process that I did go over already with you to just drive home the steps of what you would do first and second and third and fourth and fifth. So that is all I have for today. I guess we'll open it up for questions.
All right, fantastic. Thanks so much, Steffi. Appreciate it. Yeah, the rest of the hour that we have is just open for Q&A. Let's talk about this or related ways to have these climate conversations in challenging places. What's on people's minds?
Sorry, I have to close my doors. It's starting to rain.
Yeah, I guess I could ask a question. It's Rob Myers. I'm part of the Raleigh Citizens Climate Lobby under the esteemed Beth Carmichael. How did you identify the towns and the people that you wanted to approach?
Really, it was I'd say anywhere outside of Asheville is conservative. Like Asheville's the liberal place, and we know we're the only ones in Western North Carolina that have one. So we thought, okay, why are they not doing this elsewhere? So we just got a resident, and the first one was Mary, and she just, or no, was Hendersonville. I just went and gave her presentation to Hendersonville High, and that's where our legislator was from. So it just seemed like a natural place. It's known to be conservative. So we wanted to start there. And now we're just reaching out to others out and about that we just figure would be good. They're not too small. That's the thing. You don't want it to be too small. We found that that's usually a waste of time if they're too small. So we're trying to go for the ones that make sense, the ones that have like LED lighting that they could, save a lot of money from, or, have some town places they can retrofit.
So you mentioned, do you look for an ally? I mean, you mentioned the one CCL
It's
person.
usually if we have someone there that's willing to approach council, yeah. So if we don't have a resident, a constituent, it's yeah, we usually wait for a constituent in order to approach, for sure.
Thanks.
I'll just add on to that. In my region, Southern California, near Los Angeles, I'm in the city of Long Beach, and Long Beach itself has a climate action plan, but there are a total of 88 cities in Los Angeles County, and many of them are smaller, in the 10 or 20,000 to 100,000 range. And the smaller the city, the less likely they are to have a climate action plan because they don't have as much staff capacity to do them. And so, not directly through CCL, but I'm a member also of the American Institute of Architects local chapter, and we're starting to reach out to those smaller cities and say, hey, would you like to do a climate action plan? You need any help? We've got pros that can help. So, yeah, Michael.
Yeah, I was wondering, great presentation, Steffi. I'm in Marin County, very liberal. When you talk about initiatives like this, the focus is at least equally on the emissions impacts and mitigating climate as opposed to the economics. Sometimes a little more on the economics, sometimes a little less. I'm wondering what your experience has been in so-called conservative jurisdictions. Is it 90% talking about the economics? Something more? Does the emissions reduction part resonate with most people, or no?
We're about to approach a very, very conservative board. The mayor's way open to climate, but he knows that the rest are not. And he told me, don't even bring it up. So I would say if you're really talking to a very, very, very conservative council, you should really try to stick to the cost savings. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Close my one door here.
Hey, Steffi and Michael, I do want to just chip in on that just for a minute. That the other thing you can do is talk about things that councils care about that are climate related, but they're not climate. Things like affordable housing, right, is an example of something you can work on. I've used that in the past with some success.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, who's next? Beth?
Great job. So I was noticing on the instructions that the first thing we have to do is get the municipality to like commit to lower their reductions by some percent. So if you're a small town and you don't know really much about any like IPCC and all of this, like how do, like, is it that they just need to make a commitment to reduce emissions and then figure out how much it's going to be by at another point, or do they have to commit to a certain percent? I could feel that being very intimidating for certain towns.
Yeah.
Because it seems like they would need to have all this information first. So can you talk a little bit about like that part of the process?
Yeah, not all of them put down a timeline, I found. In fact, some don't even do a resolution. They just go forward with it for some reason. I don't really understand that, but yeah, so you just let them do what they want to do, really. And you just recommend that, with every talk that I give and with every legislator that I meet, I always make sure they know the timeline of the IPCC, and that timeline is this, and that's what most people use. So depending on what they want to do, I just recommend it and see where they go with it.
Okay, so you're saying that they don't have to have something like that in place specifically if they want to try to apply for funding for something?
No, I mean, I don't know if a climate action plan, I think you know, in order for them to get funding, it might be needed in the climate action. I'm not sure. That's a question for that pro bono state readiness project people, because they really know the ins and outs of what grants require what things. Yeah.
Okay.
I would just add, at least for some of the federal grants, that's why, you know, there was funding out there for climate action planning. The expectation is to access some of that funding, you have to have somewhat of a plan and greenhouse gas inventory numbers of some sort. How you go about doing that, what that looks like, will depend from municipality to municipality. But
Right.
there are some standards around, you know, greenhouse gas inventories. The the area that's a gap right now that everyone is trying to fill is on embodied carbon, which is dealing with the role of materials and industrial emissions. But you know, that's something I think will pop out over the next year.
All right, Gary.
Yeah, so whenever I hear about these climate action plans, I wonder how sustainable it is. Do people say they'll do it and then down the road forget about it? Is there? Do you recommend doing some follow up to see that you know, in a year or two they're ignoring it, or do you think that's not necessary?
I don't think it's necessary. If they're on board with this, they're usually on board, especially with the grants going out right now, and you know, that they're available right now. Like, moving quickly is important, but I don't know if I'd micromanage like that. I feel like they might get a little peeved if I was to like follow up and see how they're doing. But you know, I just let them do. Like, you just give them the information, and if they're on board with it, they are, and if they're not, they're not.
Hey, Steffi, one thing I'd recommend, I do this all the time. Any of us can do this, is you look at their annual budget when it comes up and you see if they're putting anything in the budget to support the plan. And, you know, there's always public comment and places for, you know, constituents to ask questions in the public development of budgets. And, you know, you ought to be doing that every year, just as a good citizen, period.
What kinds of things in their budget would support this? What kinds of things?
Well, you might look and see, for example, if they funded for a climate action plan, are they funding for projects afterwards? And how are they putting that in the budget?
Oh, you're saying, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So you just do that as the normal budget process. That's how
Yeah.
you hold their feet accountable.
Yeah.
So you mean, like, do they have money set aside to buy some electric buses or buy LED lights, street lights or something? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can,
But also I've noticed that like recently we approached Brevard, and apparently we approached them just before they had their annual meeting with each other, I guess like a retreat before they do their budget, and they decided on their focus areas. And I was appalled, but they decided in the end that their focus areas wanted nothing. It was nothing in there regarding environment or sustainability. And because of that, they came back afterwards and said, well, it's not in our focus areas, so we're not going to do it. So, you know, you kind of got to get it on their radar. Is it going to be a focus area for them? And what better way to do that than with the youth, who basically come out and say, this is my future. I want you to do something about this. All right.
Good discussion. Thank you.
Hey, I was just going to comment on the topic a couple of questions ago about what should be in a climate action plan. Do they need to have an inventory of greenhouse gases, et cetera? By all means, that's the fundamental basis for any climate action plan, and that's the right way to do it. On the other hand, if you're in an area where, you know, writing something that has an inventory of greenhouse gases would make it seem evil or, you know, whatever, in one sense, you can basically say, all right, as long as we're electrifying things, we know we're going to eliminate on-site emissions, and we know that the grid is getting cleaner in nearly every region of the country and the globe. And so we're accomplishing the goal, even if we're not measuring it. So the best way is with an inventory, but the second best way is just go ahead and electrify and get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess I focus more on like measuring their energy use. I don't know if I haven't really brought up measuring their greenhouse gases. I've talked about measuring their energy use. What are their costs involved with powering their cars, the gas and maintenance involved there? Because if you get into gas and maintenance with the cost comparison of buying an EV versus a gasoline car is way better. They just don't always incorporate those costs. So things like that. But that measuring tool, that ClearPath tool from ICLEI, it gives some great, apparently they have, I can't remember what it was, like 50 projections of altering different energy use as to how much it will reduce their costs by. And that's what I focus on.
Cool, thank you. What else? Yeah, Beth?
All right, so can you just talk a little bit more about approaching conservative areas? Because like we're going to be going into some conservative areas and I'm a little I just want to make sure that we couch it in the right terms. Like we've talked in the past about how you don't want to go in and like talk too much, climate change. And so all of our resources talk about climate change. So how do you talk about it that it doesn't push people off?
I just say sustainability or resilience. Those two words are what I use. In fact, you can change those documents to say that. In some cases I have, and I will change it to say sustainability action plan or resilient action plan. In fact, if I could find this Hendersonville website for the action plan there, you'll see that it's, there it is, Hendersonville nc.gov/sustainability. View the sustainable strategic plan page for more information. Here we go. I'm going to put it in the chat and bring it up, maybe share screen. And in fact, the first page, the one where they created this resolution, the city council, you'll see there's no mention of climate change in here. They wanted to recognize the following core values and beliefs related to sustainability that should be upheld. Maintaining a solid relationship with residential and business development, responsibility to protect our natural resources, lead by example, prioritize the protection of existing tree canopy. And so they created that resolution based on those things. They didn't even mention, but they did have GHG by 30% by 2035. They did put in a measurable amount. And then if you visit the actual page where they created a climate action plan within a year, couldn't believe it, within a year they did this. And they adopted it just recently and outlined it, what they're doing. So they're addressing 5 key focus areas. Waste management is one of them. Land management, water, energy, transportation. So you can also track the plan's progress as it goes on, but this is the 14 actions they plan to do. This is a perfect example of a very, very conservative area where they don't want to say the words of climate change. And I think that's one of the reasons the mayor was so slow to come on board, because she was so afraid of the backwind that she might get, or the, I don't know what you call that, from addressing the blowback from addressing climate, but they did it in such a way that there was no blowback. There was none.
It makes sense now, your story about the student involvement. It's like I can see the mayor like latching onto that as finally an opportunity that she can't, like, she has political cover if students are asking her for it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then it got covered in the paper too. So that made it even more. Yeah, at the end of the article, it didn't seem too likely because they were very conservative with their answers in the article. But no more than 2 months later, they hired staff, a sustainability staff person. Okay, Rebecca?
Yes, great presentation. Thank you for sharing. I have a question about, obviously you're reaching out, your team, your group, your chapter's reaching out to a lot of different cities and municipalities. And I'm wondering, as some of the other chapters here in North Carolina are trying to get on the bandwagon, is there a way of kind of tracking, like, where you're already working so that we're not trying to go into, we probably wouldn't be going as far west as you, but
Yeah.
so that we're kind of keeping sort of track of which chapter is, say, got dibs on this city or this town, so that we're not, you know, kind of interfering with each other.
Yeah, I have a spreadsheet already going, and I should share it with Ellen, our state coordinator, so she has it as well, and she's very aware of us doing it. So definitely having someone keep track of what towns you're approaching. I have like a spreadsheet of if they got it done, a link to the climate action plan, who's the contact or resident in that area, the CCL member that's doing this, any notes about council, you know.
Right.
We do our research on council first. We try to figure out, you know, what resolutions they've passed in the past, or what's the background of sort of city council people. You know, sometimes we do a research call.
Yeah, because I know there's a lot of conversations going on about who should be hitting where. And then getting back to the very, very basic to kind of follow up to a couple of other things. So as you're setting the meeting with a resident, you're not going in saying the purpose of this meeting is we want to convince you to do a climate action plan or sustainability. You're going in with, we're concerned about such and such.
Yeah, so
personal story.
The way we worded the email is the person typically states that I'm a resident and a volunteer of CCL with urgent concerns regarding blah, blah, blah. In support of CCL's mission of moving forward with bipartisan solutions, I'd like you to meet with I'd like to meet with you to learn what the town is currently doing to reduce municipal emissions and or energy costs, as well as discuss the potential for adopting a sustainability plan like 10 other cities in North Carolina have already done. So that's kind of the beginning part of the email. So it does kind of state what they want to talk about, but it's stating it in the way that I have these concerns. I'd like to meet with you and talk about them and find out what you're doing. We want to hear about what you're doing. Okay, Michael.
Yeah, back to our conversation on, and Beth's question on effectively communicating with different folks about climate change. I just put a link in the chat to Yale's program, which is focused entirely on the communication of climate change and 6 Americas and different ways to go about it in different parts of the country and what people are receptive to, not receptive to. It's just, I haven't gone through it in a lot of detail, but I think it's something that's used a lot by CCLers to think about, to come up with a communication plan. So it could be just an extra thing to look at when you're going into new areas.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good resource. Thank you. Oh, Jay.
Yeah, I just wanted to add 2 other thoughts. One is, you know, as you're thinking about this, the question is, I think it's, you know, you're not trying to convince them that, you know, that you're the most right or you have the right answer. It's really about meeting them where they are and then pushing them to go to the next place. in a way that makes sense for them, right? So it's as much about not a science conversation as it is about an anthropology, being from a social science perspective of how do you meet people and kind of find out what they're doing and then say, oh, if you just did a little bit more, you could go do this, and kind of push them along the path that might go down further down the road. The other thing I wanted to point out, Mark was correct. I put in the chat, they recently announced some implementation grant awards for the climate pollution reduction grants. And in there, a lot of them were given to rural entities and coalitions in red states. So if you read through the list of the selectees and the things they put in their application, those are things you could probably talk about, right? That are in a safe spot because they're being done in other places. And it isn't that they're saying, oh, you got to agree with me on climate change or IPC or anything else. But what it does conclude in there, actual projects of things people are working on that, as you said appropriately, so Steffi, say we're going to reduce our energy consumption, which will save us costs. Going to reduce the bills for the residents that we're trying to support, that we're having to subsidize for paying energy bills, right? That type of thing. So I think that'll be a useful resource for people to see at least how other local governments have framed the conversation in rural communities, and you can beg, borrow, and steal from that.
Yeah, definitely. And in some cases, like in Asheville, they had a whole Blue Horizons project that they created a whole committee for that helped figure out the best ways to help residences and businesses reduce their emissions community wide, so outside of the government. So that's like a whole nother step level. Asheville's way ahead of the curve. So I don't know any other towns that have gotten there yet, but that is after they've done their municipal savings. And then reaching out to the county is the next step also. So some grants won't come to towns unless they have a wider swath. So if it's actually, also working with the county, then they're more likely to get the grant. So that is something to keep in mind as well. So after you get the city on board, or enough cities in a county, try to go to the county. I see Paul Taylor asks in the chat, is it best to meet with officials individually or in a small group? So officials, apparently they have this quorum thing. So like if you're meeting with, I don't know, was it more than 2 at one time? It's considered a quorum, I think. So which is considered a meeting, which means they have to take notes. And so you don't want that. You want to do it in small groups. So either 1 by 1 or 2 by 1. So in some cases, you might meet with the town manager. Sometimes the mayor will bring in the town manager and as well, so that they're kind of on board too. But they don't make the decisions, even though they might be on board. They won't. It's the council members who have to. Okay. And then Beth again, yeah.
Sorry, Steffi. Listen, people are paying attention.
Yeah,
when they ask a lot of questions. So yeah, considered a mark of an attentive audience. So I know you said earlier that we should let them worry about the grants and all of that. But we've got a lot of people in here who know a lot of grants, and it would make me feel better if I had any idea, if anybody knows when the end of the grant horizon is.
There's so many. I can't say a date. There's no, they might go on a year or 2 or 3. I don't know. Like there's just so many grants out there. I just can't. It's so overwhelming. I don't even want to get into it.
I'm not suggesting that you have to say, I just want to make sure that all of the IRA funding grants don't have a cutoff date that I need to worry about. And then
Jane knows probably.
Yeah, so I can probably help you with that. When you're looking at I call it the formal grant. So keep in mind that the direct pay is really a form of grant through a tax subsidy, right? That's available to government, schools, and nonprofits. That goes for 10 years. But the grants that people are applying for, generally speaking, for most of the Inflation Reduction Act, have to be out the door and what they call committed, which means it's out to a grantee by February of 2026. I mean, not September of 2026. Okay, that's in the statute for most of the programs. Now, some of the DOE energy technology investments probably have a longer time period, but for the ones you're talking about of working at local governments in communities, most of that is 2026. Now, with that being said, one other thing, there is, and I think Steffi, you mentioned this formula money that comes through things like, HUD housing grants and energy efficiency housing grants. Those will continue on after IRA. They just won't have as many dollars in them as they used to. But there are, as you know, a number of grants right now that are out there specifically under IRA that will go away, and those will go away after the end of 2026.
So yeah, that stresses urgency right there. That's good to know. Jacob, we're about 3 minutes before the end.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation, Steffi. I have a question about the role of youth. I want to check an assumption that you would enlist youth to participate in the process when you encounter a resistant town government. Is that correct?
Yeah, because it's a lot of work. Like, luckily in Hendersonville was work, right? It took us a lot of work to get there, and I didn't want to have to go down that road, but I did. It panned out. But Waynesville, we didn't even have to go there. We just met with one person and it was done. So
Okay. All right.
it just depends on, like, meet with them first, see what's up, if they're going to move forward or not. If you notice them not doing it, just go to the youth. Don't even bother trying to get adults. Yeah, don't even. I went to talk to churches. I had churches. I had environmental groups. I had so many adults try and come in. That was a waste of my time.
Okay.
Waste. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll take the lesson. Thank you.
Okay. Pete.
All right, fantastic. Yeah, I was just going to try to help us come to a close here at the top of the hour, and folks can stay on if we want to, but we'll probably close the recording in a minute and close the formal part of the meeting. One more thing about bringing youth into this equation. Youth can and usually are tremendously motivating to adults in leadership positions. Sometimes they get shined on just like everybody else. We had an experience locally where youth were trying to engage a school board for over 2 years and not getting emails answered, going to public board meetings and making comment, but essentially being ignored. They couldn't get a meeting. And we had 2 or 3 different adults trying to help them over that period of time. Some of those adults were trying to make bank off the youth. They were saying, "Oh, I've got a solar company. I'll go pretend I care about the school and the kids, but try to sell my solar." And guess what? People saw right through that. I got involved and was able to try to help find a balance where I was trying to de-risk the approach for the school board and helped the students in the school board each see the approach that Rewiring America takes is what I used. Anyway, we're near the top of the hour. One thing I wanted to mention coming up throughout August Electrification Month, as CCL has been doing, they're encouraging us to have conversations about whatever the topic or theme of the month is. And so next month, that'll be conversations about electrification. So whether those are at electrification fairs, tabling events, whatever. One resource that's new to us is CCL has a partnership with a nonprofit named Work Money, which in turn has been working with Rewiring America, and they are developing scripts, and they have a hotline that people can call toll free and get help for how to apply for incentives and that kind of thing. It's a little bit like the couple of the resources that Steffi told us about, which are resources for towns and cities. These are resources for individuals. I don't expect them to be as highly professional as what Steffi was saying, cities and towns could take advantage of, but it's out there. So know that CCL will be starting to promote a toll-free number that we'll be able to encourage people to call. But I've got one anecdotal experience with a person that we work with engaged with that hotline and didn't get a satisfactory result. They basically said, I'd like to learn about electrifying my appliances. And the response from the hotline was, gee, we don't know anything about that, but we have this program called LIHEAP, the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, and I can tell you all about that. So that's just one anecdote. But if we're trying to set up a way to gather feedback and make sure that any allegedly helpful resource that we give out is as helpful as possible. So if you hear of folks who are having trouble with it, just let us know. National staff might be setting up a feedback form. They've done that in the past in a few cases. So, but if nothing else, let us know through the action team with as simple as a post in the forum or whatever. All right, so that's it for this evening. Nothing else to pass from here. Steffi, thank you so much. That was amazing. And everybody else, we'll see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel for electrification fairs, all electric home tours, and induction meal parties, the new Tupperware party. So talk to everybody then.
Good luck. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Steffi.
Thank you. Good
Thank
luck.
you. Yes.